Eliza Blake had 3 glasses of wine in her system when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the first time that evening. She had heard it once already, but had assumed it was just the wind, or perhaps a stray noise in the old building. But now, there it was again. Clear. Insistent. The last thing she wanted was an interruption. Not tonight. Not Christmas Eve. She froze mid-sip, the wine glass hovering close to her lips. Nobody was supposed to be here. That was the entire point of her holiday getaway. Alone, in a cozy apartment that didn't belong to her, looking after a cat that wasn't hers either. Luke Marshall, the apartment's owner, had hired her through some app to water his plants and feed his cat while he jetted off for the holidays. A simple, solitary task. And it was working perfectly. No family gathering to remind her of the ache in her chest from her breakup 2 months ago with Nathan. No sympathetic glances from friends who couldn't seem to stop asking if she was okay. No one around to ask why she was still single, or to mention the yoga instructor, Zoe, who had stolen Nathan away from her. Just Eliza. Just wine. Just Marmalade the fat tabby cat. But now, there was the sound of knocking. Louder this time. Persistent. "Luke, we know you're in there. Open the door right now." The woman's voice was sharp and demanding. Eliza's heart stopped. She hadn't expected this. The door opened with a heavy, unsettling creak. She debated, should she just ignore it? Pretend no one was home, that Luke wasn't in there? But there was something in the woman's voice that made her freeze. It was then that the panic truly set in. What if they used the emergency key? But before she could even fully process it, the woman's voice cracked through the tension in the air. "Your father's back is killing him, and I'm not standing in this hallway all night." Without another thought, Eliza bolted from the couch, her heart racing. She threw the door open, trying to put on her most convincing smile, her hands still slightly shaking. 2 people stood in the hallway. A woman, in her 60s, with bright silver hair, rosy cheeks, and a look that could only be described as determined. Next to her was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and carrying 2 massive suitcases. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and yet here he was. They stared at her, and for a moment, all she could do was stare back. "Who are you?" the woman demanded, her eyes narrowing. I'm Eliza," she stammered, the words rushing out. "I'm flat-sitting for Luke. He's not here." Her voice faltered. "Oh my God." The woman's eyes went wide, her expression changing so quickly that Eliza wasn't sure if she was about to apologize or rip her apart. She didn't know what to expect next. But the woman didn't get a chance to speak before she turned to the man. "James, look," she cried out. "It's her. It's the girlfriend." Eliza's stomach churned. What was going on? The woman grabbed her hands with surprising force. "He said he was bringing someone for Christmas," she exclaimed, her words rushing together. "But he didn't say you'd be here in London, in his flat." "I'm not. No, I'm not his girlfriend." Eliza tried again, her voice shaking, but the woman cut her off. "Don't be modest," she said, beaming. "He told us all about you, but not all. He's very secretive, our Luke. He said he'd met someone special, someone for Christmas." Eliza could feel the blood rushing to her face. She had to explain herself, but everything that came out sounded worse. The situation kept spiraling out of control. Fiona, the woman, was still talking, chatting away about how much she had heard about Luke's mystery girlfriend, but none of it made sense. Fiona introduced herself, then James, her husband. "Oh, you're beautiful," Fiona said, clasping her hands together as if Eliza was some long-lost daughter. "Very nice," James mumbled, his voice tired and distant, but somehow still polite. Eliza didn't know what to say. She was still stuck in the disbelief that this was happening. "I'm not his girlfriend," she said again, voice more insistent this time. Fiona waved her off. "Don't be shy, dear. He told us you were coming. And when Luke says something, it's the truth. He mentioned bringing someone special for Christmas." Eliza didn't know how to respond to that. "I'm just here to feed his cat," she said softly. "That's all." Fiona blinked, then looked over at James. There was confusion in her eyes, but there was something else too. Something like disappointment. "I don't understand," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "He said he was bringing a girlfriend. We came down early to surprise him, to travel up to Scotland together." Eliza's chest tightened. The warmth and kindness in Fiona's eyes made it worse. They were clearly exhausted from their trip, expecting one thing and finding a stranger in Luke's flat instead. The guilt surged inside her. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wish I could help. Fiona stared at her for a long moment. There was no anger in her gaze, only confusion and a deep, painful disappointment. Well, she said after a long pause, I suppose we'll just go to a hotel. Wait for Luke to sort this out. It wasn't a question. It was a decision. James seemed to agree, though it was unclear whether he wanted to protest. Eliza couldn't just send them away like that. She couldn't send them off into the cold night, without a place to stay. They'd come all this way, expecting to meet Luke's girlfriend. And now they were being told to leave. You can stay here, Eliza heard herself saying before she could stop. Fiona stopped, eyes wide. What? The flat has a guest room, Eliza said quickly. I'm sure Luke wouldn't mind. You're his parents. You should stay. Fiona's expression softened, and Eliza wasn't sure if it was out of gratitude or shock. But she was nodding, a huge smile on her face. Well, I couldn't possibly impose, Fiona said, but her voice was already light. It's not imposing, Eliza replied, stepping back from the door and holding it wide open. I'll make tea. You'll be fine here. Fiona's face lit up. Tea? And biscuits? She turned to James, her excitement building. She's offering us biscuits. Eliza couldn't help but smile at that. Yes, there are biscuits. I heard. What a lovely girl, Fiona said, her voice warm. She swept past her, patting Eliza's cheek as she entered the flat. As Eliza shut the door behind them, she felt an odd sense of responsibility settling over her. This wasn't her Christmas. This wasn't the plan. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel quite so alone. As we move on, I just want to remind you that, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to support our growth, because this story is just getting started. Eliza tried to make it through the evening with grace, but it wasn't easy. Fiona and James settled in quickly, despite the confusion, and the evening was spent with light chatter and lots of tea. By the time Eliza poured herself a second glass of wine, Fiona had already started cooking up a storm in the kitchen. There was a warmth to it all, something so completely different from the silence of her usual holiday routines. The clattering of pots and pans, the constant buzz of conversation, and the scent of homemade food all felt so foreign, yet so welcome. She tried to relax, to enjoy it, but it felt like she was still watching from the outside. Luke wasn't even home, and yet, here she was, pretending to be part of a family that wasn't hers. She was the stranger in their midst, the fake girlfriend who had accidentally stepped into their chaos. You must be exhausted, Fiona said, glancing at Eliza from across the room. It's been a long day, but you're here now, and we won't let you leave alone. Will we, James? James gave a small, tired smile but didn't respond. He didn't need to. Fiona had already claimed her as part of the family, and it was as though Eliza had no say in the matter. She was caught up in the whirlwind, trapped by the kindness and the expectations. Eliza tried to smile back, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She was still too caught up in her own thoughts, unsure of what to make of everything. The doorbell rang again, cutting through her daze. This time, it was followed by a knock. Eliza, could you? Fiona asked. Eliza stood up, grateful for something to do. She walked to the door, unsure of what to expect, but when she opened it, she was met with a face that made her heart leap into her throat. Luke. It wasn't just his presence that threw her off, it was the look on his face. He looked like he'd been through a war, his clothes rumpled, eyes tired and worn. But when he saw her, the tension in his face seemed to melt, just a little. There was something about the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, something that made her stomach tighten with confusion and something else that she couldn't quite place. Hey, he said quietly, almost sheepishly. Eliza blinked, her mouth dry. Hey, sorry, he said quickly, stepping into the flat with his bags. I didn't expect all this. I thought I'd be gone longer. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing around. What's all this? Fiona appeared from the kitchen at that moment, wiping her hands on her apron. Surprise, she exclaimed, rushing over to hug Luke. We came early, to meet Eliza, and to surprise you. I've been dying to meet your girlfriend. Come on, sit down, we've got dinner almost ready. It's perfect timing. Luke froze. Eliza caught the look on his face before he could mask it. Something cold, something distant. She had no idea what it meant. Fiona grabbed his arm, steering him toward the kitchen, and Luke reluctantly followed. Eliza, left standing in the hallway, felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on her shoulders. What was she doing here? Why had she agreed to this? And why did it feel like it was all spinning out of control? She couldn't help the flicker of doubt that crept in. Was this whole thing a mistake? Had she misread the situation? But before she could fully process the questions, Fiona called from the kitchen. Eliza, darling, come on in. Dinner's almost ready, and I think you should help. You've made a lovely impression already. You fit right in, don't you think, James? James grunted his agreement from the table where he sat, nursing a drink. Eliza didn't know what to do with herself. But she couldn't leave now. Not when Fiona was so determined to include her, and not when Luke was already in the thick of it. She walked into the kitchen, where everything smelled of rosemary and roasting meat. Fiona was already plating up food, and the chatter around the table was growing louder. When Luke looked at her, she couldn't read the expression on his face. He was sitting beside his parents, his hands wrapped tightly around his glass. He barely glanced up as she entered. This wasn't supposed to be her holiday. She wasn't supposed to be here, trapped in this lie. She wasn't supposed to feel this pull toward Luke. But when he finally met her gaze, for just a second, his eyes softened again. Something between them, unspoken and untouchable, passed in that moment. It left Eliza feeling unsettled. Everything okay? She asked, trying to sound casual, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. Luke hesitated, his gaze flickering over her face, then around the room. Yeah, it's just a lot, he said softly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Eliza wasn't sure what to say to that, so she simply nodded. He had lied to his parents. He had made up this story, this fake girlfriend. The whole thing was so far removed from anything she had ever imagined that she didn't know how to navigate it anymore. But then, Fiona's voice rang out, cutting through her thoughts. Come on, sit. Let's eat and enjoy this time together. Fiona waved Eliza over to a seat beside Luke. Family Christmas, no matter how chaotic it is still a gift. As Eliza sat down at the table, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing control of something she hadn't even known she'd signed up for. The evening unfolded like a surreal dream Eliza couldn't escape from. The food was delicious: roast lamb, crispy potatoes, vegetables tossed with herbs, and wine flowing freely, but every bite tasted bittersweet. She could feel Fiona and James watching her, as though she were some delicate artifact they had found in the attic, treating her with a warmth she hadn't known in years. It was overwhelming and strange, but it also felt comforting. Too comforting. Her thoughts kept circling back to Luke. He was sitting beside her, his hand absently resting on the edge of the table, his expression unreadable. Every so often, his eyes would flicker toward her, but he said little. It was like he was mentally miles away, yet physically right beside her. He would pick at his food, not really eating, and take long sips of his wine, looking more and more exhausted by the minute. Fiona, oblivious to the tension, kept talking, pulling Eliza into her stories about the family back home in Scotland, about the grand Christmas celebrations, and about the chaos that never seemed to stop. And Eliza couldn't help but wonder, what would it be like if she belonged to this family? What if she wasn't just a stranger here, caught up in this fake relationship? Tell us, Eliza, Fiona was saying now, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. What do you do back in London? Eliza blinked, momentarily caught off guard. She hadn't been expecting to talk about herself. She had always been the one to listen, the one to observe. I'm a freelance editor, she said quickly. I mainly work on books, nonfiction stuff. It's quiet work. Ah, a bookworm, Fiona exclaimed. You'd get along with Luke's Aunt Marjorie. She's always got her nose buried in a book. Eliza glanced at Luke, hoping he might step in, say something. But his gaze was fixed on his glass, and he didn't seem inclined to join the conversation. His silence felt heavy, like it had been placed there on purpose. So, tell me more about these books, Eliza, James chimed in, leaning forward. He was friendly enough, but something about his attention felt probing. What kind of stuff do you like to read? Anything, really, Eliza answered, her hands instinctively curling around her wine glass. But mostly historical stuff. Biographies, memoirs. Sounds like the perfect kind of work for someone like you, Fiona added, clearly pleased with herself for keeping the conversation going. And how about Christmas? What do you usually do for the holidays? Eliza's chest tightened at the question. This was where the lie felt most painful, where her loneliness was most glaring. She couldn't answer with the truth, not when she was sitting at this table, pretending to be someone else. I usually just take it easy. Stay home, Watch movies, read a lot, Eliza muttered, the words slipping out before she could censor them. Fiona's face softened with sympathy. I understand, dear. I can see why you'd be hiding from the world a bit. But you're not alone now, are you? You're with us. You're one of us. One of us. The words echoed in Eliza's head, and despite the warmth behind them, it felt wrong. It felt like she was wearing a mask, pretending to be something she wasn't. The pain of her breakup with Nathan, the feeling of rejection and loneliness, it all seemed to push forward in her chest. The weight of the lie was suffocating her. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be pretending. But with every laugh, every kind word Fiona offered, it was getting harder to tell the difference between what was real and what wasn't. Eliza felt Luke shift beside her. For the first time all evening, he turned to look at her, and his eyes were softer, but also uncertain. Something was tugging at her, pulling her in the direction of honesty. But she couldn't do it. She couldn't unravel everything now, not with Fiona watching her so closely, not with everyone already assuming things that weren't true. As the night wore on, the tension between them, the unspoken truth, grew just below the surface. Eliza felt Luke's distance, the way his mind seemed to drift away every time their eyes met. She wanted to bridge that gap, wanted to reach out and connect, but how could she? How could she ask for something real when everything about their situation screamed fake? After dinner, Fiona led Eliza into the living room, where the family gathered by the fire, talking and laughing. Luke lingered behind, pouring himself another glass of wine, and Eliza didn't know whether to feel relieved or disappointed by his withdrawal. The fire crackled, throwing warm light across the room, and Eliza found herself sinking into the couch, marmalade curling up beside her. She wasn't sure how long she sat there, lost in her thoughts, until Luke finally came over, sitting down beside her, his face drawn and tired. Are you okay? Eliza asked, her voice quiet. Luke didn't respond immediately. He simply stared into the flames for a moment, the silence stretching between them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. Yeah, he said, but there was something in his tone that didn't quite match his words. Just tired. Eliza nodded, unsure what else to say. She couldn't help but feel that there was more to the story, more that he wasn't telling her. It was in the way he avoided her gaze, the way his posture stiffened when he looked at her. He wasn't just physically distant, he was emotionally checked out. And that's when she realized something. This wasn't just about the lie. It wasn't about pretending to be his girlfriend. It was about the deeper things that neither of them had said out loud. About who they were, who they weren't, and what this all really meant. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoed in the background, but Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that the most important conversation was the one happening silently between her and Luke. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Tell us where you are watching from and what you think about our story. Your support means a lot to us. The next morning came with a bitter chill in the air. Eliza woke up to the soft murmur of voices and the scent of fresh coffee. She had barely slept, her mind racing with everything she was trying to keep in check. The weight of the lie still felt heavy on her shoulders, but there was something else now, something unsettling. The more she spent time with Luke's family, the more real everything seemed to be becoming. And that scared her. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She was supposed to be leaving in a few days, slipping back into her solitary routine. But now, with every passing hour, the idea of being part of their world, their chaos, their noise, their warmth, felt more and more like something she might want. But then there was Luke. She found him sitting at the kitchen table, his fingers wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee. His gaze was distant, his eyes bloodshot as though he hadn't slept much, either. When he saw her, he didn't smile, didn't even make eye contact. He just gave a small nod and took a slow sip from his mug. Morning, Eliza said softly, walking over to the counter to pour herself a cup of coffee. Morning, Luke replied, but there was an edge to his voice that made Eliza hesitate. The air between them had shifted overnight, and now, in the light of day, it felt almost impossible to ignore. There was distance between them, not just physical, but emotional. She could feel it in the way he looked away when their eyes briefly met, in the way he kept his posture tense, as if he was guarding himself. Are you okay? Eliza asked, unable to keep the concern from her voice. Luke didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into his coffee cup, his brow furrowing slightly, as though he was battling some internal conflict. Finally, He put the mug down with a soft clink. "I'm fine," he said, but it didn't sound convincing. "Just a lot on my mind." Eliza bit her lip, unsure of what to say next. She had been tiptoeing around the truth for days now, afraid of pushing him too far, of confronting him about what was really going on. But she couldn't pretend anymore. "It's not just the family, is it?" she asked, her voice gentle. "You've been different since last night." Luke's eyes flickered up to meet hers, and for a brief moment, there was something raw and vulnerable in his gaze. But then it disappeared, replaced by that same guarded look. "I'm just tired, Eliza," he said, his tone flat. "It's nothing." But Eliza wasn't fooled. She could see the cracks in the facade. There was something deeper going on here, something that Luke wasn't telling her. And it made her wonder if maybe he wasn't as invested in this fake relationship as she had hoped. Before she could ask more, Fiona entered the room, her ever-present smile bright and wide. "Good morning, you too," she chimed, walking over to the stove to check on breakfast. "Eliza, you're still looking a little pale. How about some fresh pancakes? They'll help." Eliza smiled weakly, trying to shake off the discomfort she felt sitting in the same room with Luke, surrounded by his family. "Sure," she said, trying to keep the mood light. "That sounds perfect." Fiona beamed at her, clearly happy with her attempt at normalcy. "You're a trooper, Eliza. I can tell you're just like Luke, always working, always staying busy. But now you're with family, and we take care of each other." Eliza nodded, though a part of her felt like a fraud. This wasn't her family. She didn't belong here. She was just the stranger in the middle of their holiday. "Where's James?" she asked, trying to shift the focus away from herself. "Outside. Probably trying to make a call or something," Fiona replied, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "You know how he is with business. Always working, even on Christmas." Eliza smiled politely, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Luke. What was going on with him? Why did he seem so distant? And why had he lied to his family about her? She had seen that look in his eyes last night. The same guilt, the same regret. But it was more than that. It was fear. Fear of what? Fear of losing control of the situation? Or was there something more? Something she wasn't seeing? The rest of the breakfast passed in a blur of polite conversation and laughter. But Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that something was falling apart. The closer she got to Luke's family, the more complicated things became. She couldn't stay trapped in this pretend relationship forever, but she couldn't seem to let go, either. As the meal wrapped up, Fiona clapped her hands together and announced, "All right, everyone, let's get ready for the Christmas market. Eliza, you've been so lovely to join us, but you're not getting out of this one. You're coming with us, whether you like it or not." Eliza laughed awkwardly, but deep down, she wasn't sure if she was excited or terrified. The day ahead felt like another test, another opportunity to prove that she wasn't just a temporary fixture in their lives. She followed Fiona to the door, where the rest of the family was already piling into the car, but before she could step outside, Luke caught her arm. "Eliza, wait," he said quietly. "We need to talk." She turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. His eyes were serious now, the playful mask he had worn the night before completely gone. "What about?" Eliza asked, her voice low. "I know you feel out of place here," Luke said, his voice tight. "And I know I've been distant. But this," he gestured vaguely toward the house, the noise of his family outside filling the air. "This whole thing, it's more complicated than I thought. I didn't mean for things to go this way." Eliza swallowed hard, her pulse racing. "What do you mean?" Luke ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated with himself. I don't know how to do this. How to pretend. How to lie to my family. And now you're part of it." Eliza's chest tightened, the weight of his words sinking in. This was it. The moment where everything could unravel, where the truth could break free. But Luke didn't finish his sentence. He just stood there, his face a mix of guilt and confusion. He didn't know what he wanted, and neither did she. The Christmas market was everything Eliza had imagined it wouldn't be. Crowded, chaotic, loud. And yet, beneath all the noise, there was something almost magical about it. The twinkling lights on the stalls, the smell of cinnamon and mulled wine in the air, the cheerful chatter that rang through the cobbled streets. All of it painted a picture that was too perfect to be real. It was the kind of scene that looked better in movies, the kind of place where everything should fall into place. But as Eliza walked beside Luke, her hand brushing against his every now and then, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing here was real. Not her relationship with him, not the way his family looked at her, not the way he kept glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. They were supposed to be pretending. But with each step, each laugh, each polite smile exchanged with Fiona, James, and the rest of the family, the line between the fake and the real kept blurring. Luke's hand brushed hers again as they passed a stall selling knitted scarves. Eliza tried not to let the simple touch affect her, but it did. It made her stomach twist with uncertainty. She couldn't keep pretending, could she? Eliza, Luke said, his voice quiet against the noise of the crowd. We need to talk. Really talk. Eliza stopped in her tracks, her heart leaping into her throat. She turned to face him, hoping for some kind of clarity, but his eyes were distant again, unreadable. His face had been closed off all morning, and now, standing in the middle of a bustling market, it felt like they were miles apart. About what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter whatever fragile connection they had left. About us, Luke said, his eyes meeting hers. I know this has been messy, but I need you to understand that this isn't how I expected it to go. I didn't want you to be involved in this charade. Eliza felt a chill run through her, but she didn't back away. Then why did you lie to them? Why did you let it go on like this? Luke's jaw tightened, his gaze flickering to the busy market around them before settling back on her. I don't know. It seemed easier at the time. My mom kept pushing me about my love life, about who I was bringing home. And you just what? Eliza interrupted, frustration creeping into her voice. You just decided to make me your fake girlfriend? For what? So you wouldn't have to face the truth? I didn't mean for it to go this far, Luke said quickly, stepping closer to her. I just didn't want to disappoint anyone. Not my family. Not you. Eliza shook her head, her chest tightening. And what about me? What do you think this has been for me? I'm not just some random person you hire to play a part. This has been real for me, Luke. Maybe more than you think. Luke's eyes softened, but only for a moment. Eliza, I didn't mean to. No. She cut him off again, her voice sharper now. You didn't mean to do anything. You didn't mean to let me in. You didn't mean to make this feel real. But here we are. And now what? What do we do? Luke opened his mouth to speak, but stopped himself, clearly struggling with the words. I don't know. Eliza took a step back, the distance between them growing. She wasn't sure if it was because of her own emotions or his, but something inside her was cracking. The hurt, the confusion, the uncertainty, it was all building up to this moment. You're not the only one who's scared, Eliza whispered, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. I didn't expect this either. I didn't expect to be part of your family's Christmas. I didn't expect to feel something for you. But now I do, and I don't know what to do with that. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Luke didn't move. He just stood there, his face drawn with a mixture of guilt and something else, something unspoken. I'm sorry, Luke finally said, his voice strained. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want any of this to be real. But it is, isn't it? Eliza nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. Yes, it is. She turned away from him, needing a moment to breathe, to gather herself. She couldn't keep doing this. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. But as she walked away, she felt his eyes on her. The weight of his gaze was like a constant pull, making it harder to escape the emotions that had been growing between them. Fiona caught up with her a few moments later, her face lighting up as she spotted Eliza walking alone. There you are? Don't wander off like that, dear, Fiona said cheerfully, linking her arm with Eliza's as she led her toward the group. We're all heading to the Christmas tree lighting. You have to see it. It's magical. Eliza forced a smile, nodding as she let herself be pulled along. But the magic of the moment was gone for her. She had seen the truth. And now, all she could do was figure out how to deal with it. As the evening wore on and the crowd gathered to watch the tree lighting, Eliza felt more and more like an outsider. Luke was nowhere to be found, lost in the sea of people. The warmth of Fiona's arm around her felt like a comfort, but it also felt like a reminder that she was just a guest in this world, one who didn't belong. And then, standing in the shadow of the massive tree, with the bright lights and decorations glowing all around her, Eliza realized something. She had let herself get too close. To Luke, to his family, to this whole situation. But she wasn't sure anymore if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like, share, and comment where you are watching from in the comment section to support our growth. The following day was Christmas Eve, and the Mallister house was alive with chaotic energy. Eliza stood on the edge of the action, watching as the family prepared for their festive dinner. She had managed to slip away from Luke's side after their conversation in the market, needing space to think. Her thoughts were a storm of confusion and frustration. Was this just a holiday illusion? Something to fill the empty spaces of Christmas with? Or had she really let herself get attached to something that wasn't even real? Every time she thought she had it figured out, another piece of the puzzle seemed to shift, revealing something new, something more confusing. Luke had been distant since their talk, almost too distant. And yet, when he looked at her, there was something there, a flicker of regret, of longing, maybe even fear. But those moments were fleeting, disappearing as quickly as they came. And then there was his family. Fiona's warmth, the way she had welcomed her without hesitation, had felt so genuine. The family's acceptance, even though they had no idea who Eliza truly was, had been something she hadn't expected. But that was part of the problem, wasn't it? She hadn't expected any of this. Eliza, dear, Fiona's voice broke through her thoughts as she bustled into the living room, where Eliza had been standing by the fire, watching the flames flicker. Come help us with the last-minute things. We need someone with a steady hand to arrange the place settings. Eliza gave a small smile and nodded, grateful for the distraction. She followed Fiona into the dining room, where the table had been set with the finest china, gold-rimmed plates, and crystal glasses gleaming in the soft light of the chandelier above. As Eliza adjusted the silverware, her mind wandered back to Luke. He hadn't said much all day, too busy with whatever he was doing around the house. His silences were starting to feel more like barriers, like walls he had built to keep her out. The question lingered. Was this really worth it? Was she really helping him? Or was she just being swept up in something she couldn't control? How are you feeling, dear? Fiona asked as she carefully placed a platter of roasted vegetables on the table. Eliza froze. What do you mean? Fiona's expression softened, and she stepped closer, her tone lowering. I know this hasn't been easy for you. Being here, with us. You're not just the girlfriend in this story. You're a part of this family now, whether you planned on it or not. I can see it in the way you care for Luke. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected Fiona to see that much, to understand what had been happening in the few short days she had been with them. I don't know what I'm doing, Eliza confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. I came here to help out, to get away from everything, and now, I don't know how to leave, how to go back to what I had before. Fiona patted her hand gently, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. You don't have to leave, Eliza. If Luke's already let you in, then I'd say you've already made this place your own. We've all been a little lost in our own ways. We find our family where we least expect it. Eliza swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it harder to breathe. But that's just it, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be a part of this. Fiona didn't answer right away. She just gave Eliza a long, knowing look, as though she could see through all of her fears and doubts. Finally, she spoke softly. Sometimes, the things that seem like accidents, the things we never expect, are the things we need most. Eliza wasn't sure what to make of Fiona's words. They hung in the air, heavy with meaning, but also with the weight of Eliza's own confusion. Before she could respond, Fiona brightened and clapped her hands together. Well, enough with the heavy talk. Let's get the final touches on the dinner. Eh? The family's waiting. Eliza nodded and followed her back to the kitchen, but Fiona's words echoed in her mind. Could it really be that simple? Was she just a part of this family now, despite everything that had happened? Dinner arrived, and the chaos only escalated. The family filled the dining room, a whirlwind of noise and laughter, clinking glasses, and plates being passed back and forth. Eliza found herself caught up in the movement, her hands busy as she tried to keep up with the rest of the family. But her mind kept drifting back to Luke. He hadn't been in the room much, slipping in and out, staying out of the conversations as much as possible. And every time she tried to catch his eye, he quickly looked away. Something was wrong. The space between them was only growing. It wasn't until the moment dessert was served that she finally saw him. Luke stood in the doorway, his hand resting on the frame, watching her. His face was unreadable, as always, but there was something in his eyes that made Eliza's chest tighten. For a moment, everything else seemed to disappear. The noise of the family faded, the clinking of cutlery slowed, and there was just the two of them. The words that needed to be said were hanging in the air, but neither of them knew how to start. Eliza felt herself move towards him, as if drawn by some invisible force. The moment she reached him, Luke stepped forward, his hand reaching out as though he had been waiting for her to take the first step. "Eliza," he began, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk. For real this time." The air in the living room seemed to still the moment Luke reached out to Eliza. His eyes, tired but searching, met hers, and for the first time since they'd met, there was no mask between them. There was no pretending, no lies, just the raw, unspoken truth of everything that had been building between them. "Eliza," Luke began again, his voice softer this time, less like he was defending himself, and more like he was finally ready to admit something he hadn't been able to say. "I've been running from what I really want, from what I've been feeling. I didn't expect this to get so complicated. I didn't expect you to become more than just the fake girlfriend. I didn't expect to fall for you." Eliza's heart skipped a beat. She felt a rush of emotions flood through her. Relief, fear, hope, confusion, all swirling together. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eliza asked, her voice trembling, a tear slipping down her cheek. She didn't try to wipe it away. She couldn't. She was tired of pretending to be strong, tired of keeping it together when everything was falling apart. "I was scared," Luke admitted, his own voice rough. "Scared of messing it up, scared of disappointing you, my family, myself. I made up this story because I thought it would be easier than facing the truth." Eliza took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had spent so many days wondering if she had made a mistake, if her own feelings had been misplaced, if she had been chasing something that wasn't real. But standing here now, facing Luke, feeling the sincerity in his words, she knew something had changed. They had both changed. "I was scared too," Eliza whispered, stepping closer to him. "I came here thinking I'd hide from the world, but I didn't expect to find something real, something worth fighting for." Luke reached out, gently taking her hand. "So, what do we do now?" he asked, his eyes full of hope, but still carrying that weight of uncertainty. Eliza paused for a moment, looking around at the warmth of the family gathered in the background. Fiona, James, and the rest of the Mallisters, all laughing and talking, none of them aware of the storm that had been brewing just behind the surface. This wasn't her family, but she realized something. Maybe it didn't matter who she had come from or what she had been running from. What mattered was what she was choosing now. "We take it one step at a time," Eliza said, a sense of peace beginning to settle over her. "We stop pretending, and we see where this can go." Luke's face lit up with a smile, and for the first time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't hidden behind a facade. It was real, honest, and full of something both of them had been missing for too long. "I think I can live with that," Luke said, his voice steady now, his gaze never leaving hers. They stood there for a moment, the world around them fading away as they took in the moment. The warmth of the fire crackled in the background, the chatter of the family around them a distant hum, and for the first time, everything felt right. The dinner that evening was unlike anything Eliza had ever experienced. As the night went on, she found herself truly part of the Mallister family. Not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as someone they had all accepted. Fiona's laughter echoed through the house. James shared stories of his youth, and even Grandma Mallister softened her stern gaze when Eliza asked her about the family's history. And there, amidst the joy and the chaos, Eliza felt something she hadn't felt in so long: belonging. By the time midnight approached, Luke and Eliza stood together by the Christmas tree, their fingers entwined. The moment felt full of promise, full of the things they hadn't yet said but would. Luke leaned over and whispered, "You know, I think I finally understand what my mom meant when she said, 'When you know, you know.'" Eliza smiled, her heart full. "Me too." And in that moment, under the glow of the Christmas lights, with the sounds of family and celebration around them, Eliza knew this Christmas would be the one she'd never forget. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. It was messy, complicated, and everything in between. But it was theirs. This holiday season, we're reminded of the importance of being true to ourselves. Sometimes, life pushes us into situations that feel uncomfortable, that seem too good to be true. But it's in those moments of discomfort that we often find the greatest growth. Eliza's journey was about more than just love or family. It was about embracing vulnerability, accepting the parts of ourselves we try to hide, and having the courage to let people in. The story of Eliza and Luke shows us that even when things seem complicated, even when we're scared of what comes next, there's always a chance for something real to emerge. And sometimes, the best thing we can do is stop pretending, take a leap of faith, and trust that what we truly need will come to us in its own time. So, if you're feeling lost or unsure of what comes next, remember, don't give up. Keep moving forward, even if the path isn't clear. You never know what might be waiting for you just around the corner. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Turn on the notification bell and tell us where you're watching from and what you think about this story. Let's keep the conversation going and inspire each other to stay hopeful and keep going, no matter what. Because giving up is never an option.